Innately, we are not born to be anxious. We are not born to be depressed. We are not born to have triggers because of airplanes or whatever phobias that we get, spiders, whatnot. They came from somewhere. So when we follow that logic, we can ask the body to show us where it started.
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is The Conscious Habit, a show from the PeopleForward Network. We're teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, at home, and the world at large. You just heard from Laurel Wiers. She's the founder of Optimal Outcome, and she helps people eliminate their triggers so they can elevate their performance. She shares her journey of how, as a therapist, she completely wanted to avoid anything trauma related, but realized that that really is the route to helping people get beyond themselves. She has blended a unique approach of various therapies together so that she can work with people on a very short-term basis. A lot of her work with her clients may be 1, 2, or 4 sessions for them to completely eliminate past triggers that could be holding them back. In this conversation, in this episode, she shares how trauma manifests in our lives daily, in our lives, our relationships, in our leadership styles, and why traditional talk therapy alone is typically not enough. She shares the profound connection between the body and trauma, the power of reprocessing critical memories, and why high achievers, hello, me and you, let's listen up to this, why we often mask unresolved wounds with success, keeping us on that chase. Super powerful conversation today with Laurel Wiers. I'm so excited for you to take a listen. Conscious Habit listeners, I'm so excited for our guest to join us today. She is an expert in some of the stuff we've talked about on the show prior to, but I cannot wait to hear it from her lens. Laurel Wiers is a psychologist, a therapist. She specializes in trauma and helping people get through those stuck points, specifically executives, the things that may hold us up from growing ourselves or our businesses. She dives deep into those, traumas and those hardwired belief systems within our brain and our body and helps people overcome them. And today she's going to help us better understand how to recognize what's trauma, what maybe isn't, what do we do if we find that we have these stuck points. And I'm just thrilled to go to all of these places. Who knows all the places we're going to dig into together, Laurel. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun. I can tell already. And I'm so excited to share with your listeners.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I always tell my clients, hey, trauma is something that I don't touch because it's a very delicate area to go to. And you need somebody who fully understands the psyche and, where this is trapped and how to work through it. And so I'm grateful for people who do what you do. So, when I get to those places with clients, I can say, hold up, wait a minute. That's a little deeper. Then we can go here.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate people like you who really can understand, this is something we can easily work through, and who also recognize, yep, this is beyond what I do, and just easily move them over. That truly is such a blessing to people in my field, because so often we find people trying to dig in areas above what they're equipped to do. And it just gets so messy when that happens. And that can create an experience that the person won't go further to deal with what they need to. So thank you.
Well, I know in our first conversation that you and I had, you were like, I didn't want to touch trauma with a 10-foot pole. I was like, no way, no thank you. And now this is like your jam. So what has been your path to even fully accepting, all of the gifts that you have?
Oh, well, thank you. It's a fun story to tell, because right when we end up somewhere that we never thought we would end up in, we know it's exactly where we should be. So I, as a therapist, would see people with trauma, and I knew that talk therapy just didn't help them. It was quite evident when they're coming back 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks later, 2 years later, that they were in the same spot, that I did not have either the skills, tools, or ability, is what I believed at that point in time, to help them get through what they needed to. So I very quickly learned, because I'm super results oriented as a therapist, I want you to get better soon. I don't want you to hang with me for life as much as I may adore you. I want you to be on your way doing the things intended for you. So I would send them out to other people in the community that did other modalities that said they were healing trauma. Some of them were, some I don't know so much that they did or didn't. And I did that for about 17 years, a long time. And then 8 years ago, I ended up hearing about a modality when I was laid up in bed. I had hurt my back and I had done what many of us do is we either research or watch documentaries on things that we love. And I heard these veterans, they were talking about how they were healing from their trauma, doing a form of therapy called accelerated resolution therapy or ART. And I thought, this sounds legit. I need to go check this out. So I was signed up within 4 weeks and I was trained by the developer of the modality, which is such a gift because who can say that they were trained by the person who created this method? And after that weekend, I had 3 clients lined up that I said, I'm going to try this out. And I went in so scared, like just literally looking at my notes, thinking, gosh, I hope this works, crossing my fingers, holding my breath. And it worked. My first case, I'll never forget. It was a girl who had had a tragic accident with her infant, and he had fallen. And that had created a trigger response in her that she could not look over balconies or stairwells without going into fight or flight mode. And we processed that event. And she went to the mall that day after our session. And she called me and she said through tears, Laurel, I am sitting here at the mall. I am looking down on the first floor and I feel nothing. I am as calm as could be. And I thought, hallelujah, it worked. So from there, I was an addict and I was like, I just want to heal the walking wounded in any way that I can. So I started seeing more and more people. And now that's pretty much the only work that I do.
I would love to know because I feel like, and we've talked about this on the show prior too. So Desiree Garcia, who's a co-host on the show often, we have these conversations about what does it look like to experience just like problematic behavior in the workplace that can turn into like it can create some trauma for us. We've talked to people who have experienced pretty extreme workplace abuse that created trauma for them. But I'd love to know from your lens, like what if you had you do have the microphone, Laurel, but if you like had a microphone to shout from the rooftops for the whole world to understand, what would you want them to understand about trauma?
Ugh, this is such a beautiful question. So thank you for asking it. I would first of all say, let's stop calling it trauma because trauma in and of itself removes people from considering that they have a response that needs to be addressed in a powerful way. So for example, we all know the big T, little t's like rape, death, car accidents, things like that. But when it comes to bullying, right, workplace trauma, being bullied in the workplace, emotional abuse, a bad relationship, someone just calling you a name when you were 8 years old, that sticks with you. We don't necessarily call that trauma, but it has the exact same response in our nervous system as a trauma. And so that's what I would want people to know, that anything that you start to come up against constantly, whether it's a behavior, a response, a trigger, and no matter what you do, no matter how you try to think through it, or how many mantras you have, or how many times you've meditated to try to get through it, and you keep showing up the same way, that is the indication that there's something deeper going on. When we have, I call them negative life events or a critical memory. When those things happen in our life, they get wired in us differently. And so when we get triggered, our prefrontal cortex, it goes offline and we're no longer thinking in a rational way. And that's why we can't think our way through it or just be intentional and say, I'm going to show up differently this time. So if you start to see that happening, then you have to realize, ooh, this is wired somewhere else in my body, somewhere else in my brain, and I need a different way to attack it.
It is interesting to make those differentiation because I think of myself more as an advisor and a consultant, and then there is some coaching that happens, but we kind of get in there and help figure out where is the root of these challenges. And there's a lot of times that it can be changed with better awareness, awareness of the automatic judgment, awareness of the triggered action or behavior, and then, switching that kind of loop up between the judgment and the action can be effective just with repetition. If people do it enough, they change. But what you're saying is, even if you are finding that all of the things that would typically work in habit change or behavioral change is still not working for you, it is because it's a deep-rooted trauma and it's being treated the wrong way.
Yes. And whether it's deep-rooted trauma or just a deep-rooted critical memory that keeps showing up for you, that's what's going on. So a distinction with what you talked about, which I love. Yes, you are so right that people can go through programs and they can change up the way that they're thinking, and they're perfectly fine. I love that for them. But you'll always find you got the couple people that they're like, this just isn't happening for me. So two things, like you said, yes, maybe it's because you just consciously cannot work your way through it because it is subconscious. The other part is what I tell a lot of people is when you deal with the root of it, you actually can avoid the need of the repetitive behavioral modification and changing the way that your mind looks at things. So a lot of people will say to me, well, I'm going to spend the next 6 weeks focusing on this thought process so I don't have this self-limiting belief. And I say, how about we just go to the place where it started, neutralize it and remove it, and then you don't have to spend the 6 weeks doing that. And it's true. When you rewire it, it's done. And that's what my clients say all the time. They're like, Laurel, this was so easy. Why did I not find you 10 years ago? Well, I wasn't doing it 10 years ago, but it's so much easier than people believe. So when you ask that question, which is, what do I want people to know? This is the second big thing. One is that these things, whether they're from, traumas or critical memories that are keeping us stuck, we can address them. But second, it doesn't take weeks and months and years of looking at them to fix them. That is the biggest misconception why people don't even go down this road, because they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to take so long and I don't want to be in that space. And I'm like, no, sometimes it's literally one session. Sometimes it's 5 or 6, but that's pretty small compared to the idea that most people have.
Wow, I think it is incredible because a lot of times we think change is hard. There is friction there. If it's taken me my whole life to get to this, it's going to take me so long to get to, get to this other place. And so I love that you've created and you've developed your own unique, like, it's not like people can just call up any therapist in the world and be like, hey, yo, I heard this Laurel and I want whatever she's doing. Like, it's a unique combination that you've created for your clients.
Yes. So it's developed over the last 8 years. Initially, I was doing just ART, that form of therapy, and it was fabulous, wonderful. It did what it needed to do. But as time went on, I started to notice that some people, for example, I had a girl who was in a plane crash. That's something I would deal with ART. We got her through it. She could fly on planes. No big deal. One session. It lasted for 3 years, and then it broke. The way I had been trained, this was not possible, which started to make me question what's going on here that this one didn't stick. Like, people leave my office and they would say, do I need maintenance? And I'd say, nope, you're good. Believed it 100% till these things started to pop up. So then I had to question what else is happening here. And then I started to learn that sometimes when we can clear a trauma that we think is all that's there, there's something lying underneath it that needs to be uprooted. And sometimes it doesn't show itself till you get triggered again. So what happened with this girl was she flew fine for 3 years. She came home on Christmas break, went to the dentist and had a root canal. Super traumatizing experience. Everything went wrong and she had to have multiple surgeries to fix it. Well, that was her body, right? Releasing another feeling that was similar to the plane. It was a helpless response, but it actually wasn't about the plane. It was about her childhood. What it revealed was, let's go back a little bit further. And we found out that a situation with one of her mother's boyfriends had been the root of this helpless feeling. So once we process that, then we can fly on the plane again because now we found the root. So then I realized I needed to use other methods like critical memory integration and EMDR to process out some of these other things. So when I work with people now, based on what they're presenting, I kind of do this dance, I call it, that flows between all of them to really have a holistic approach at not just getting rid of the trigger, but integrating, right? Bringing the person back to that version of themselves that experienced the initial wound. And that's what most people don't recognize. They can come in and say, I can't fly, but they very rarely know, ooh, this feels really similar to my 8-year-old self. And when we can go back there and connect with that first experience of helplessness and heal that, oh, it's beautiful, the integration that happens. And then I can go and clean up that plane crash. And then I can clean up that dentist experience. And then they walk out completely in a better space.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like how often, because obviously a plane crash, that is a big ass trauma. Like, I mean, holy, that is like, that's big. And you would know that. You would know, like, I had this major experience. It created this phobia or trauma or, fear, whatever. And I'm wondering how often people don't know what the thing is that's causing. And so it's more symptomatic. Maybe it's like, I can't hold a relationship. I self-sabotage at work. I go into fight or flight often whenever I'm asked to do challenging things. I can't get healthy, no matter what I do. Are those common symptoms that you might see from people who say, I think there's something deeper, I just don't know what it is?
Yes, they will come in and they will say, no matter how hard I try, Laurel, because they know I'm the trauma girl. They're like, I've tried every form of therapy. I've done everything. I don't know what's going on. There's got to be something more, but I just don't know where it is. And I'm like, yep, you're right. Because innately, we are not born to be anxious. We are not born to be depressed. We are not born to have triggers because of airplanes or whatever phobias that we get, spiders, whatnot. They came from somewhere. So when we follow that logic, we can ask the body to show us where it started.
I love this. I'm curious. I got to speak for all of the women out there. I swear we need like a support club of all of us who are perimenopausal women who are between the ages of 35 and 45 and then even beyond, who you come into this part, hormones are changing and there's so many things that are amplified. Mental health, and there's a mental health crisis for women who come into these ages and stages. And I'm curious, based on your background, do you see that some of it is trauma-based, but it's amplified through the changing in hormones? Because I hear from friends, clients, confidants, women who come on our High Vibe Tribe retreat who are struggling with this, just feeling more anxious, feeling more depressed.
Yes, that is, again, another beautiful question. So, two-part answer. The first one is, yes, for the person who's been completely fine most of their life, and then they go through this and they're a little wonky, I would immediately say, go find a naturopath, get your hormones tested, and get on bioidenticals, like ASAP. But again, I'm not going to send you for Zoloft. I'm not going to send you for Wellbutrin. I would rather you deal with the core problem and deal with the root of it and get your hormones balanced. However, this is the beautiful part of part 2. What happens with life is we have this compounding effect, and you go through and you function and you're just fine. And by the time you hit menopause, you have lived a life. And quite often that is just the thing that made you fragile enough, right? Having hormonal imbalances, going through the change, that all of a sudden it's almost like you become a little more fragile and your ability to balance all these things gets challenged. And quite often when women come in that state, once I do the med check and send them to the doc and make sure all is well, I say, now let's start pulling apart the layers. And inevitably, we will track back to when I was 8, when I was 18, when I was 24, when I was 30, when I was 40. And so we start to make this timeline of where the anxiety started and just peel off the events that have now been hardwired into our body. Quite often, we don't have to clear all of it. Whatever you feel in your body is typically a re-triggering of something earlier. So I will say to someone, so let's say I have a woman come in and she says, I have this anxiety all the time. I don't know where it's coming from. I'll say, okay, let's check in with your body. Like, where do you feel that anxiety? And then she'll say, oh, it's in my chest or my stomach. And then I'll say, okay, close your eyes. And I'll track her back. I'll say, just feel that, feel where it's at. And now just let your mind go. I may do some bilateral stimulation while they're doing this and say, what is your body showing you? When else in your life did you feel this way? And we'll start to go back. And they may give me 3 or 4 things. And I'll say, well, let's start with the first one, because the first one may be the initial onset of your anxiety, and you just were super tenacious and you were able to withstand it your whole life. But these other 3 events after, they're re-triggerings in a sense of that first initial episode. And so if I can clear that first one of 2 things will happen. Either the rest of the things that they mentioned fall because the anxiety lived within the first event that we cleared, or we clear the first one and 2 or 3 of them go, there's only 1 more that we have to address. The body definitely holds feelings thematically the same. So if somebody has anxiety, it's going to show up the same way in their body through all those big events. Versus if they have anxiety and they also had a car accident, if I were to ask them how they feel about driving in the car after the car accident, it actually might show up differently in their body than the other anxiety, which tells me we have 2 things we need to process now. We need to go back and figure out anxiety and also process your car accident. It's so amazing how the body can be so specific almost in the difference of where we feel things.
It's interesting. I have been sharing with friends and clients that I'm like, we often go to the brain for information, but the body really holds it. It knows what's up. It really does know what's up. Like the subconscious and unconscious mind, it's so much of it is stored within our body. And I have said lovingly, our brain is a little bitch. It will believe anything. We can talk it into or out of anything, and it can collect the evidence in whatever ways, but the body doesn't lie. And I love that you shared that it's stored in the body. By the way, you mentioned a phrase. I just want to go back. You said you'll do bilateral stimulation. And I immediately thought, what is that?
Yes. So bilateral stimulation, that is getting both hemispheres of your brain moving back and forth, going on and off. So I'm going to do that whether I move your eyes back and forth. That creates bilateral stimulation. Or with a lot of my clients, I use these tappers, remote tappers, if I'm doing it virtually or in person, that they hold. And it just gives like a buzz that alternates. And when you do that, you do a couple things. You basically calm the body. So while we're starting to look at difficult moments, your body's in a better place to start looking at them without getting as, aroused, you could say. And then the other thing is we have both sides of the brain now talking to each other, right? One side of our brain holds the images and sensations. The other side of our brain holds the narrative. We get them both talking so we can process out what's happened. But then also we're distracting the brain. And when we distract the brain, that also gives us a calmer reaction to something that's difficult to watch. So I provide that so that people can go back without the resistance. If you ask someone a question like, now that you feel where your heart is racing, go back in your life to where you felt that. If they're kind of an anxious person, they're immediately like, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm not going to be able to do this. And so like they're fighting it. But if I'm like, just while I ask you this question, let me just move my hand back and forth in front of your eyes and just see what comes up. It's amazing what happens. They're all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, this can't be it. And I'm like, oh, it is if you just said that. And they'll be like, I was 10 years old, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, yep, there's our scene. And now let's test it. Does it feel the same when you think about 10-year-old you and you think about the version of you now that's anxious? Do they match? And they say yes. And I'm like, bingo, let's go in and clean it up.
I love this. I see it's proof of how like the brain really is a little bitch. You just get it distracted, like, look over here. And
absolutely. Yes. And it tells us lies. So I had a client last week. This was super fascinating. She has lots of eating issues, overeating. And she had this story that she told herself, which was that I always was told that I wasn't allowed to eat food. And that has made me want food. It's always been scarce. It's been withheld from me. So as she came in and we started processing this scene that she remembered when she was like maybe 6 years old at a family friend's house, they were having card night. We start going through the scene and she starts to see it more clearly. And she pops up in one of our processing moments and she goes, oh my gosh, Laurel, there wasn't even a lot of food on the table. It was only chips and dip. She had pictured a table that was a buffet. And then her mom never told her that she couldn't eat it. Her mom just said, you either have to go in the basement with the big rowdy boys, which scared her, or you have to sit in the living room by yourself. And while she sat in that living room by herself, she watched this table of chips and dip and thought, if I eat too much, my mom's going to get mad at me. So she was just bored. And literally the entire narrative changed. It wasn't that she couldn't stop herself from eating, it's that she was bored. It was crazy, wild how when you can clear things that our brain tells us and see the true narrative, you can get meaning from it. That completely shifts the story and the lens that you go forward with.
It's interesting. I mean, it's so fascinating to think of all the stories that we're carrying around and whether they're real or not. I would love to know what are some typical, you work a lot with executives, a lot with, folks who are just finding these stuck points. What are some of the symptoms? We mentioned earlier, like maybe it's like, I can't lose weight. I can't, it's relationships. But when you're talking to executives, what are some of their symptomatic stuck points?
So, what I notice most of the time is it's either general depression or anxiety they seem to be cloaked with suddenly. And it's keeping them in this space that their creativity has been thwarted, their concentration it's been very difficult for them. They will sometimes start to be having the physical signs where they're starting to have panic attacks where they never had that before. They might be losing their hair, they might be gaining weight or losing weight, and they're not sleeping good. So they're coming in with this kind of just general shift in their overall wellness that they're like, something's going on here, and I'm not quite sure, where it's at. And they know that because what they're trying to do is level up. So either they know they have a big shift in the company coming where they're moving it up to a different, value, we'll say, or they know that they have another role that they're heading into, and they just feel this sense of, I can't do this. I am at my wit's end. I am frayed and I am fragile and I need to figure out what's going on. And typically in that moment, we'll find this is what's so fascinating. We'll find 4 or 5 things because high performers are high performers. They have the ability to compartmentalize and to overcome. And I'm finding this most amazing theme that many of my high performers have multiple traumas that they have not dealt with, because the fact that they were able to shove them down and to succeed or to find worth in other things besides their trauma is what has made them so successful. So then when we hit that point that their body, right, is like no more, then we can start to peel the onion in a sense and get through the different layers. But that's what I find. Or it's just this in general reactivity to people at work. And you're like, that is not my true self. Why did I just react that way to that person? And why do I continue to behave that way? That's one of the bigger ones beyond the other two where they're like, I just know I'm not the person I need to be right now. It's typically that they're just reacting in very unbecoming ways.
I would imagine that there's also some self-sabotaging behavior, and whether people can see that themselves or not, but I've seen like executives where it's like, what? You're saying all of these things, but then your actions are totally mismatched. And there's a lot of shifting and non-committal. And, there can be a lot of that behavior. And I love that you mentioned high achievers. So many of our listeners, I think, fall under the categories of high achievers, people pleasers, and perfectionists, which can all be trauma based, right? Of like, I would imagine that we achieve in order to feel safe and in control and worthy. I mean, for all of it, there's a worthiness component, I'm sure, that comes in. For people pleasers, we need other people to feel good and safe, and we'll sacrifice ourselves for it. And, perfectionists, if I have all of these standards. And so we're typically masking something in all of those pieces. And I'm sure many people are like, she can do that in 1 session to 4 sessions or a 2-day intensive. Like, yes, please sign me up.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's how most people feel. They're like, if we can clear this out, that would be so fabulous. And you're right. It's all those personality tendencies, the profile, you named it, the people pleasing. It's the need to be seen quite often because they were not for whatever reason, whether it was abuse or just unavailable parents that had their own stuff or being bullied in school. Somewhere along the line, the message was that I'm not enough, I am not seen, and I have to do something big in order to get attention. And I just love being able to sit with someone and find that earlier version of themselves and say, let's heal her or him so that you no longer have to function with that being the momentum underneath that I need to get worth through the things that I do because, as we know, ultimately it costs you.
And I think the struggle for many high achievers is like they are so burned out because it's never enough, right? They're so burnt out by the pursuit of more and bigger and better. And yet they're terrified of who they will be if that pursuit is gone. And so, how do you help them with that? Like, it's almost like, but this gives me my edge, but the edge is also stabbing them in the heart. So, like, how, how do you
Exactly.
help them kind of make peace with healing that part of them and yet not feeling like that means that they're just going to have no ambition and drive?
Totally. Thank you for bringing that up. So that's what a lot of them say, right? I've gotten here because of who I am. To which I say, it's like having a fire alarm that goes off all day, every day. Fire alarms are only useful when they work for what they're supposed to. They need to go off when there's a true emergency, but it does not need to be going off all of the time. When you are in this space that you think you have to perform it at 10 all the time, inevitably, you're making mistakes. You are burning out. You are snapping. You are not resting. You are not thinking through things clearly. You're being emotional. You're being impulsive, right? You're doing all of that stuff. So I say to them, it's like we're just going to take off the hypervigilance, the things that make you do those things that you're less proud of, and just live in the zone of what's your zone, where it's really good. I am not going to remove your ability to function and be successful. It's like when I talk about people that have accidents with fires. I say, I'm not going to make you love running into a fire by clearing up your accident. I'm going to just make you not be so scared every time you see smoke. So that way you can have a natural and balanced relationship with fire. The same thing with executives. I just want you to have a natural and balanced relationship with your drive so that it's no longer making you do the things that are not the best version of you.
Hmm. And how great, because I'm sure there's many people who they stay in striving mode and then they kind of get to this place where like they sell their business or maybe they retire and there's so many regrets of I prioritize all of this for what? And yeah, the money's nice, but like my kids are grown and then the relationship with them isn't where I want to be, or like my health isn't great now. And how great that you are a resource to help people minimize future regret.
Absolutely. I love that they can come in and we can kind of look at it and say, let's build a plan going forward so you don't end up there. But that's also the key, Amy, is that I can't help people that don't see a problem. So a lot of times spouses will say, my partner needs to see you. And I will say, only if they think they need to see me, because that's the beauty of this type of work. It doesn't work unless you really want it to work. It doesn't work unless you see that there's a true problem. And quite often I've had people come in and I can look at their life and be like, whoa, there's like 4 things we need to work on here. And they're like, nope, I just want to work on this one. And that's all I can do. I'm not a hypnotist. I'm not going to make you do something that you don't want to do. I am going to only work where you're able to work, where we're aligned together and we're invested together.
So it sounds like the trauma, whether you know it or not, it can be identified through the different therapies that you're doing. I mean, as we mentioned, like some people may know I had a car accident, I had this, but other people may just be, I have this symptomatic behavior and it's a diving in to figuring out where it comes from. Is it undoing that old belief and replacing it with a new one? Is there a more positive hardwiring, or is it just erasing that altogether?
Oh, so much in that too. So it's a little of all of it. So in a sense, when somebody comes in, right, and you have a belief that's tied to a memory set in your life, a critical memory, what's happening is you're seeing the worst part of that memory over and over again. And that's becoming the belief about who you are. So whether it's going to be shame or whether it's that you're not enough, that's what you're living in. So when we go in and do the work, what we do is we change the way that your brain stores the images and sensations. Those are the things that are making you triggered. Those are the things that you struggle with. Those are that nervous system that needs to be reset. So once we can neutralize that, we actually can change how your brain looks at it and we can make it more positive. So part of the work that I do is once we desensitize you to the awfulness of the event, then we actually recreate it. It's called positization. That's what the developer calls it in ART. And you say, how do I wish this had gone? and then you create a narrative for how you wish it was. What's so fascinating about that is it's not recreated memory. You will be able to walk out of the session and tell me every fact about what happened about this awful event that we processed that day. However, the images and sensations are changed. There are going to be positive sensations, and you're going to start to see the new images, the ones that you wish you could see. So one of two things happen there. Either you're like, oh, now I just see myself taking a different road home that day and I never got in the accident. Or what is so cool is when you clear trauma, you actually start to see the truth. So when some people go back and clear childhood trauma, all of a sudden they start seeing the good that they have never seen for years because the trauma stood in front of it and we cleared it out and uncovered it. In that part, I don't even have to tell them what the new belief is. By the time we get to the end of the session, they're like, it wasn't my fault. I couldn't do anything about it. I've actually been loved this whole time. I was okay. It wasn't my problem. They clear and see that truth. And then the cool part about it is they don't even have to rehearse it anymore. It literally becomes wired in you as your new truth, and you're going forward out of that state. That's why I say this work is so different than regular therapy and just like rehearsing things in your head and trying to believe them to be true. It literally recalibrates the way that you see yourself once we have cleared the things that were blocking the view of who you really were. I call it a reset. We're resetting you to who you were before those words were spoken over you, before those events happened. Who would you have been had those things not happened? And when we clear it, you now have the opportunity to be that version of yourself because it's as if in your system and brain, they did not happen.
How cool to have this experience. My brain is like, I'm trying to find the words to describe because I can only understand the power behind when you shift the perception of your mind, your entire world changes. I've said forever, the eye see what the brain believes. So in doing this, what I'm hearing you say is if we can get to what ultimately created a hardwiring of the world is scary and dark and scarce, or I have no power, whatever that, kind of download is, then when that's shifted, it's almost like the veil is lifted. And now suddenly we can see the world in a more positive, safe, affirmative, abundant, place. I love that the ripple effect of this that it must create for people. And I'm a believer that world peace starts within. So thank you for your major contribution to world peace, Laurel, and all the good that you're doing with the humans on the planet. Because the more at ease we are with ourselves, the more at ease we can be with others. And that energy is contagious. And you're doing it in the best of ways. I'm so curious for you. I mean, you're taking on so much of other people's energy and stuff and belief systems. What do you do to keep yourself feeling kind of good and uplifted and conscious? What are some of your own practices?
So there's two things in that. One is I do believe that this is the work I'm meant to do. So in that, I feel like I've been gifted with this ability to really sit with people and journey alongside them in a way that I'm just naturally protected from some of the yuck and some of the drain that can happen. I don't come home tired. I have done this for years, even just with talk therapy. I could sit for 8 hours and I'm not exhausted, right? Whenever I go to a dinner party, that's the first thing someone says, how do you do this? I can't imagine what it must be like. And I'm like, no, I actually love it. And I actually want to talk to you now. Do you want to tell me about all of your problems? Because I'm not done, That's very much the way that I believe God created me. But the other part is when I go into trauma sessions, especially when I'm doing intensives, it is a different level of energy for sure. When you are pulling trauma for 8 hours a day, 2 days in a row, or 4 hours straight, or 6 hours, or whatever it would be, there is definitely a transference that starts to happen. It is heavy, and I have to be very careful about what I do with that. So two things. One is I'm surrounded by a group of believers that literally pray for me as I do it. So every time I do this, I have 3 people that I call on, and I say I'm going into an intensive. Just protect me. And I believe that that's very powerful. And so then the other part is when I am done, I usually have a massage scheduled for a couple days later, if not the next day, to just kind of work out whatever's left in me. I will do grounding. I will come home, take my shoes off, and I will stand in that ground, for a while just to kind of get myself back to where I was at. And then I just literally see myself, in a sense, shaking off anything that was there that didn't need to be there, and then just releasing that. So that's how I go forward with it.
I always love to ask that for people who are doing this, like just doing the work in the world in different ways, that it is very easy for that energy to kind of be absorbed into us, or some of those energetic ties, to kind of be out there, and having our own personal practices for keeping ourselves good and clear and open and keeping our energy our own, I think are really important for our own longevity. Well, okay, Laurel, as we wrap up today, is there some ways that our listeners, how would they best connect with you? How could they work with you? Tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
So LinkedIn is where I hang out. People can connect with me on LinkedIn if they want to find me. I also have a website. It's laurelwiers.com. And they can go there and they can book a call and talk with me and see if maybe there's something I could do to help them. But another great resource is they can text my name, which is spelled Laurel, to 33777, and they'll get a downloadable checklist of if you're triggered or not. And on the bottom of that, it just has my info. So if you think, I'm doing some of these things, maybe I want to look into it further, they can get in touch with me that way as well. And I work virtually. So if people just have one thing in their life that they're like, man, if I could just clean this up, I can do that. Or I do coaching, and also people come to me to do intensives, or I go to them. So any and all of the above are options for people.
Awesome. And where are you located?
I'm in Connecticut.
Okay. All right. A little East Coast. I'm sure book it in the fall, right? That would be a great place, a great time.
Yeah.
Or
Or the summer. Yeah, in March, I will meet my executives in Florida. I'm like, let's just both go to West Palm. It'll be a lot better for both of us.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for sharing this insight on the podcast. I think a lot of the things that you mentioned are going to resonate with people, and just their stuck points, and recognizing that it could be trauma or, a critical memory that's stuck within them. And I'm great to have you as a resource. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a wonderful conversation, Amy. Truly. Thank you.
Before we wrap up this episode, here are my top 3 takeaways. So trauma isn't just about major life events. That's always a helpful reminder. I think for myself, it's easy to think that something big had to have happened, like something major and horrible, some sort of abuse or tragedy, in order for us to be able to relate to trauma. But it could be minor things that we don't even know or remember happened. But it created such a deep pattern within us that we now have this ripple effect of other behavior that tends to follow us around. I loved how she shared, like, it could just be everyday things, everyday patterns, things we may not know. So us recognizing how trauma influences our emotions and our decisions is really helpful in our healing. If we find that we are constantly self-sabotaging, that takes awareness, by the way. Sometimes we don't recognize that. But if things just feel hard, we feel like there's constantly this hurdle in front of us, it is likely not a lack of actions. It could be triggered back to some trauma that we may not have overcome yet. 2, our body holds on to the trauma. Or as I've heard it stated, our issues are in our tissues. If we don't address this, if it's stored physically somehow, our ability to truly heal, to truly be more conscious and to grow, it is difficult. And so no amount of mind over matter is going to get us there. We've got to get the body involved in our healing as well. And number 3, healing can happen faster than we think. It does not mean we have to carry around all of these challenges or issues with us. I really love how she shared that her blend of, what Laurel has come up with, it has a profound impact on permanent healing for people. This does not have to be our quote unquote cross to bear for the rest of our lives. We can get through it. And I'm so glad that we got a chance to meet her and know that she is one of those resources out there. So if this conversation resonates with you, I encourage you to find her work, find her on LinkedIn. Make sure that we are connected on LinkedIn as well, and share this episode with someone if you know that maybe they've experienced some of these same patterns as well. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. If you dug this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you're into this consciousness thing, if you like this conversation and you want to meet more like-minded people, head on over to Facebook and join the Conscious Habit community. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.